Aren't you glad the so-called fairness doctrine doesn't apply here?
You're listening to Rebooting Liberty Radio Network. Compelling and entertaining talk.
Don't touch that dial.
Attention, patriots, freethinkers, truth seekers. You are listening to Agents of Information, broadcasting worldwide on the Rebooting Liberty Radio Network.
It is the most corrupt, degenerate, criminal government in American history.
And I'm sorry to say that the most brazen untruths always come from the left, just like most of the major plagiarism scandals come from the left, because they believe in narrative over fact.
The Second Amendment of our Bill of Rights is my concealed weapons permit. Period.
Anyone that's willing to stand next to me to fight the progressive left, I will be in that bunker.
The answer to 1984 is 1776.
If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. Don't let it happen. It depends on you.
War.
Greetings, patriots, free thinkers, truth seekers, and all lovers of liberty. You're tuned in to the Agents of Information on the Rebooting Liberty Radio Network. Thank you for joining us today. A reminder, you can find us at live.rebootingliberty.com, and we're streaming at TuneIn Radio. I'm going to give a shout out to our newest affiliate, SHR Media, at shrmedia.com. We're grateful to be part of their lineup coming in January. You can also catch our replays on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Player FM, and several other places. We got a great show for you today. My name is Jared Day, and co-host Dan Lyman is here. Dan, how are you today, my friend?
Hey, how we doing, Jared? And welcome to all that are listening. We are obviously post-GOP debate. That was just under 2 days ago, and I think most of today's episode will be dedicated to breaking down the debate and what was going on there and some of the highlights and lowlights.
Sounds good. So, what did you think of it, that debate, compared to the other four?
I found it to be, some of the highs were higher, and some of the general content was a little slow. I don't understand why particularly Reince Priebus and the RNC are so willing to hand these debates into to the worst of the establishment media. They've done two on CNN now. They've done one on CNBC, which is far and away the worst one. Although we did enjoy watching the candidates rip into the media for their hardcore bias. And then the one on Fox was equally terrible, with Megyn Kelly trying to be the shining star of the whole thing. The Fox Business one, I found that to be pretty solid. It was well managed. This one was not the worst one in terms of the moderators, but it certainly was not the best. I can't stand any of those moderators, including Hugh Hewitt. I find him to be a snarky academic. He doesn't strike me as a very interesting person. And then when you start getting into Dana Bash and Wolf Blitzer, it's just bottom of the barrel, really. Yeah,
forget about it. I have trouble even listening to Hugh Hewitt's show. I always turn the station when he comes on. It was definitely, the debate was more, into policy. It was kind of wonky at times, especially with Cruz and Rubio getting into the Gang of Eight bill and going back and forth. And there were some good attacks, though, especially Trump on Bush. That's always entertaining. And people were complaining at the first few debates that there was too many, kind of lighthearted reality show type questions, and now they've gotten into a couple of serious issues and got deep into the policy, and they're complaining that it was boring, or so you can't please everybody. But I thought it was pretty good, and we got some information out of it.
Yeah, I thought what was one of the glaring issues out of that is that there is a balance between trying to strike up these really petty arguments between the candidates, which was, what we saw in the first couple debates, really just horrible. We don't want to see that. I mean, we like to see a good battle, but not because they're bringing it to the tabloid level. But when you start digging into policy that is so deep and, let's say, murky and hard to understand, there's definitely a happy medium. And I think that happy medium could easily have been on the Syrian refugee issue, and they really didn't outright ask about that. And I think that has to be one of the most critical issues in the minds of Americans right now. I mean, there's a lot of concern about that, and they didn't really outright talk about that, which I think is unfair to the American public, because it is, like I said, one of the most important things, in the news right now and for our futures. And they really skated around that. That would have been an easy way to have literally every candidate weigh in on that issue.
Absolutely. And they need to have a few conservative moderators or news outlets host the debate. And I was looking at the social media buzz on that, and Trump and Carson accounted for 35% of the conversation on Twitter, and then Rubio and Cruz was the second most on Facebook after Trump. After Trump, of course. It's kind of interesting. And Cruz spoke the most, and then Rubio, then Trump, then Christie. It's
really nice because at this point, Cruz is dead center, standing next to Trump. They really don't have a choice but to address him, given his polling and podium positions. But it was so clear in the first few debates that they really were trying to steer the conversation away from him, because he is such a brilliant person. He's such a good talker. He is a debate champion. So clearly they're very scared of him at this point. They can't ignore him because he's doing really well. He finally got a chance to shine. But unfortunately, he was dragged down, I think, by Rubio. Rubio is just snipping at his heels the whole time. I think Rubio is trying to use Cruz as a leverage point to get himself more points, but I don't think that he accomplished that the other night. He comes off as totally disingenuous, totally rehearsed, whereas Cruz has elements of that, and he has plenty of polish, but he also comes across as sincere at the same time.
Definitely. And the audience there, the way they reacted to certain things, it was obvious that Bush had to have people in there. He got more applause than anybody except Trump.
Well, interesting little backstory on that is that there was a reporter, I forget what outlet he was with, but I was listening to him about, let's say, 20 minutes before the debate on a call-in, and he was saying that he had gotten to town, he was trying to scrounge a way into the debate, which he knew would be tough, but he was trying to figure out a way. So he contacted the Nevada RNC to find out if he could get any tickets, and he was told by the Nevada RNC that they didn't even know where to get tickets, according to them, because apparently the national RNC just stacked the place with their own people and their own operatives. And if they're all establishment people in there, clearly they're going to be on the side of Bush or Rubio or Christie, and they're very anti-Trump because he threatens everything that they have going on for them. And then another side note about that is Matt Drudge was actually spotted in the audience, which is quite rare given that he doesn't make too many appearances, and he was sitting with Ann Coulter, which I found to be very entertaining. They were both wearing some fedoras, the signature Drudge hat, and it was a nice little sight to see that he was there kind of incognito watching.
That's cool. They, if you had to guess who talked about terrorism the most, who would you pick?
I would have to say, I don't know, I felt like Rubio got a lot of time to talk about that sort of thing. I don't take anything he says realistically. You can't be for open borders and the police state at the same time and be a viable candidate, in my opinion. But he does harp on it because, just like the rest of the chicken hawks and the war hawks that surround him and that make up so much of the RNC establishment, they love to hammer on the terrorism thing. And yes, it is a huge issue, but they would never go and delve into the fact of how much the West and particularly the United States are responsible for that terrorism and creating it and also enhancing it. So to play both sides of that coin is impossible. He probably talked about it the most, but I could definitely be wrong.
He was third. It was very
third,
close.
okay.
But Cruz and Trump talked about terrorism the most.
Okay.
And each 18 times they mentioned ISIS. Now, here's the only thing I really found interesting about this was that mentioning terrorism, excluding Islamic terrorism, Rubio was second. And let's see, Rand Paul was the most. That was kind of interesting. But
I would say, if I had to just take a stab at it, knowing a little bit about Rand and a little bit about Marco, is that for Marco, he's part of the establishment. They're very reticent to touch the word Islamic. They condition themselves not to, and they have other agendas underlying for that. But then someone like a Rand Paul is probably coming at it from a different perspective because he's quite aware of who is causing the terrorism, who's behind it, who is working in conjunction with the Islamics. So, in my opinion, he probably would just as quickly say, Western-backed terrorism as he would say Islamic terrorism. That's just my take on that.
He did. I was impressed with some of the stuff he said about foreign policy in Eastern Europe and the Middle East. On Assad, let's see here. I'll come back to that one.
I can actually supplement that for you, which I found to be one of the best lines of the night. One single line. It was after Chris Christie went on a tirade about the no-fly zone over Syria. Basically, I think Chris Christie thinks the way that maybe a lot of other folks in the administration think, is that the United States gets to call the shots on everything worldwide. And Chris Christie is saying that if the United States declares a no-fly zone over Syria, then Russia has no business being there, and if they violate that, then they should be shot down. Syria invited Russia. They are allies. Russia is there on behalf of Syria. It is by no means the role of the United States to determine what another sovereign nation does with their airspace, certainly not instigate situations that can precipitate the Third World War. And that's exactly what Rand said. He turned to Chris Christie and he said, I think if you're in favor of World War III, you have your candidate. And he pointed at Chris Christie. Chris Christie is obnoxious, bloviating, tired of him yelling into the camera. He does this thing all the time now where he stares directly into the camera he says he's talking to the people at home, and he starts yelling and says, mentions every time that he's from Jersey and that he's plain talking to you. He's obnoxious. He's another establishment candidate, and he should spend more time not hugging Obama than he should lecturing people at home.
Yeah, hopefully he'll bow out soon. And maybe he didn't get the memo before the debate that the Obama administration, the red line means nothing, and they're abandoning regime change. They're going to leave Assad alone.
This is a very bizarre development. I can't understand that. A little backstory is the whole argument for everyone being in Syria right now, except for Russia, is to topple Assad, to have a regime change. And then 2 days ago, Kerry's in Russia having meetings with them, and he comes out of the meetings and says that the United States does not desire a regime change in Syria. What does that mean? Does that mean that they support the Syrian government without Assad leading it, or has there been a change of tune? Did Putin threaten them in some way? There's a lot to wonder about that. There's a lot of inside baseball. We have no idea what's going on there.
Yeah, I hope it comes out eventually. It will eventually, but we may not get the straight story as usual.
Exactly.
So what do you think? That was pretty... I watched Trump and Jeb Bush probably 15 times. I had to keep watching it. I just thought it was entertaining, if anything else.
What I find so funny about the Jeb Bush-Trump thing, Trump doesn't really go after Jeb too often. I mean, I don't feel like he does, and he might. But Bush constantly antagonizes him like an annoying little brother. And then when Trump comes back with his just epic slams, Jeb stands there smiling at him and really just doesn't know what to do. And I thought that Trump's line about, it was in relation to Bush's his poll ratings going through, down the tank, and then as a result of that, his podium position is moving further and further to the outside. And he said something to the effect of, I'm at 41 and you're at 3, so I think I'm doing better. And you started right here next to me, and you keep moving to the outside. Soon you're going to fall off the stage.
I know. It's almost, you have to see it too, the facial expressions, and I laughed harder at that some of George Carlin's stuff. It's hilarious, but I think we have
to be much tougher. We have to be much stronger than we've been. We have people that know what's going on. You take a look at just the attack in California the other day. There were numerous people, including the mother, that knew what was going on. They saw pipe bombs sitting all over the floor. They saw ammunition all over the place. They knew exactly what was going on. When you had the World Trade Center go, people were put into planes that were friends, family, girlfriends, and they were put into planes and they were sent back, for the most part, to Saudi Arabia. They knew what was going on. They went home and they wanted to watch their boyfriends on television. I would be very, very firm with families. And frankly, that will make people think, because they may not care much about their lives, but they do care, believe it or not, about their families' lives.
Wow, I forgot about that.
That was easily glossed over by the listener because of the way that Trump worded it. But that was probably one of the most important moments of any of the debates, and definitely of this one, I would say. And the reason for that is, and there's a little backstory as to what exactly he was saying and what he was accusing the Bush family of. And this all pertains back to 9/11. After 9/11, there was obviously all flights were grounded, including a lot of the military flights. But the next day, while there was still a moratorium on flights, there were prominent Saudi families connected to the royal family there and the bin Laden family that somehow managed to fly out of the United States back to Saudi Arabia, and that's what he was alluding to. And I have a couple of pieces pulled up here about that, because it really is it's a sledgehammer blow. Jeb Bush knew exactly what he was talking about. Most of the watching public probably had no idea what was going on there, but he's beginning to expose the whole 9/11 thing. And eventually, in a further episode, we'll get into that. We'll have Richard Gage on the show. He's the founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. So easily people get dismissed for talking about what really happened on 9/11 and the narrative that we've been fed and the incongruencies between those two things. But there are a lot of architects, a lot of engineers, a lot of experts out there who have analyzed all the data, have analyzed all 3 buildings that went down, including World Trade Center 7, which was the 3rd worst structural collapse in United States history. Most people aren't even aware that happened that day. But anyways, we'll get into that in a later episode, because that can take a lifetime to talk about. But back to what Trump was saying. This is a statement from Sky News. This is regarding revelations by former White House counterterrorism chief Richard Clarke. And I quote, "Even though American airspace had been shut down, the Bush administration allowed a jet to fly around the U.S., picking up family members from 10 cities, including L.A., D.C., Boston, and Houston." And this is another quote from Tom Kinton, director of aviation at Boston Logan Airport. He says, "We were in the midst of the worst terrorist attack in history, and here we were seeing an evacuation of the bin Ladens. I wanted to go to the highest levels of Washington." So Trump's statements about what happened on 9/11 and the day after, and the bin Laden family flying out, very privileged, given that no one else could fly that day. And then I just have one or two more bits about that. This is from Jeremy Diamond at CNN, and he says, he's quoting Trump here, and he says, CIA Director George Tenet knew in advance that there was going to be an attack. He knew in advance that there was going to be an attack. That was from one of the previous debates. And Diamond here examines the statement. He says, while Tenet did go to the White House 2 months before 9/11 with intelligence reports, blah, blah, blah here, and then it says, this is a tweet from Roger Stone, who's another insider corroborating this. He says, real Donald Trump is right. Bush administration knew of attack on America 60 days in advance and did nothing. And this is my last quote here. This is off Lou Rockwell, also written by Roger Stone. As many Americans know, at least 11 members of the bin Laden family were spirited out of the country in 24 hours after the 9/11 attacks with the assistance of the George W. Bush administration. The FBI still denies knowing about the 7 airplanes used to move the bin Ladens out of the country when all private, commercial, and military air travel was grounded. So we've got a big issue here. This is just scratching the surface of what happened on 9/11 and who was involved and what went on behind the scenes. And Trump is starting to scratch that surface. I admire him for that.
I was just looking at the fact-checking on something he said. He said he accused the mother of the San Bernardino shooter of having advanced knowledge of her son's plans. He was called out on that. What he said was, we have to be much stronger than we've been. We have people that know what's going on. You take a look at the attack in California the other day. There were numerous people, including the mother, that knew what was going on. They saw pipe bombs sitting all over the floor. They saw ammunition all over the place. They knew what was going on. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but finally fact check says there was no charges brought against anybody, but the mother did. It was obvious that she knew all of that stuff was in the house. So they didn't get him on that one.
And how many times does this happen now? Every single time Trump says something that the media does not want to hear, the first thing they do is attack him and call him a liar. And they hammer on that in the news cycle for days because they know that it gets them ratings. They're monetizing every word that he says, and they're capitalizing on it, regurgitating it, spinning it, cutting it up, changing it, truncating things. And eventually, after they've demonized him long enough, they either let it go because it is true or they get proved wrong, or eventually they admit that, I guess part of what he said was true, or some of it. They don't go anywhere near the nonsense, the lies, the demagoguery of the DNC and just silly little debates with 3 people at this point. All they do is lie the whole time, and the media never goes anywhere near it because those are the chosen ones, and they wouldn't, probably don't want to anger Hillary unless she, put him 6 feet in the ground.
Yeah, well, they don't even have debates, really, so...
Right.
Cruz, that was ridiculous. About Cruz and Rubio and the immigration bill, they called out Cruz about talking about FBI directors talking about vetting refugees. Mm-hmm. And even though he didn't say exactly that, you cannot vet people that don't have an identity. They don't have a name. They don't have any form. They're just coming into the country with their clothes on their back. To say that they don't have a good way to vet them, it doesn't matter if if you don't know who someone is. There's no database to check them against. So I don't know. Some of these fact checks on factcheck.org, it seems like they really want you to think that it was wrong, but they have to say it was right at the very end in 4 words, maybe.
Yeah, and so here's another, along those same lines, this is a bit more serious, and this actually got glossed over as well, and even in the what's, not the backlash, but, afterwards, this is where we're at this point. Okay, so Cruz made a statement. They were talking about the NSA spying on Americans and, counterterrorism and all that garbage that it doesn't ever actually relate to. But anyways, Cruz made a statement about that the old phone collection program was only picking up 20 to 30% of calls, and that the new program is picking up nearly 100%. And I think that he was trying to tie that in a positive way to national security, which, if that's what he's doing, that's a big mistake right off the bat. But But now you have another Republican, probably an establishment guy, Republican Senator Richard Burr, demands an investigation of Republican Senator Ted Cruz. They're claiming that Cruz stating that the new program is sucking up nearly 100% of calls he was giving out classified information and that he violated some sort of law by doing that. Now, the fact that they're doing that in the first place is ridiculous, but let's get down to the meat of that. The meat of that is Ted Cruz just told us that the NSA is sucking up virtually 100% of our phone calls, of the entire American public. That is totally absurd. It's totally unconstitutional, probably protected under the Patriot Act or some similar situation. But the fact that now other people are going after him for letting us all know that as some sort of breach of confidence, shouldn't their confidence be with the American people first? And they could say, hey, listen, we're listening to all your calls trying to find terrorists, even if they're lying. At least they should say that. But the fact that Ted Cruz could face some sort of penalization for letting us know that we're all being spied on 24/7 is, I mean, it runs so deep.
Absolutely. And now Burr's staffer, there's an ethics complaint lodged against him for doing that. The PAC is filed an ethics complaint for what Burr's staffers tweeted about Cruz. What was it?
Yeah, she said Cruz shouldn't have said that or something like that. Yes, screw you. I would much prefer Cruz said that and tell us a little bit more. That's our business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Crazy.
So I'm going to go to a quick break here. I'm going to play, a couple minutes of highlights from the debate. We'll be back in about 2.5 minutes.
Jeb doesn't really believe I'm unhinged. He said that very simply because he has failed in this campaign. It's been a total disaster. Nobody cares. And frankly, I'm the most solid person up here. I built a tremendous company, and all I want to do is make America great again.
That's not a serious proposal. We need a serious leader to deal with this, and I believe I'm that guy.
When you had the World Trade Center go, people were put into planes that were friends, family, girlfriends, and they were put into planes and they were sent back, for the most part, to Saudi Arabia. They knew what was going on. They went home and they wanted to watch their boyfriends on television. I would be very, very firm with families.
This is another example of the lack of seriousness. Look, this is troubling because we're at war. They've declared war on us, and we need to have a serious strategy to destroy ISIS. But the idea that is the solution to this is just crazy. And he gets his foreign policy experience from the shows. That is not a serious kind of candidate.
Honestly, I think Jeb is a very nice person. He's a very nice person. But we need tough people. We need toughness. We need intelligence, and we need tough. Am I talking or are you talking, Jeb?
I'm talking right now. I'm talking.
You can go back. You're not talking. You interrupted me,
September 30th,
Are you going to apologize, Jeb? No. Am I allowed to finish?
Yes, one at a time.
Excuse me. Am I allowed to finish?
Go ahead, Mr. Trump.
So, again, I know you're trying to build up your energy,
please,
Jeb, but it's not working.
One at a time.
Well, I would seek out, as I have, the best advice that exists. I won't get my information from the shows. I don't know if that's Saturday morning or Sunday morning. I don't know which one. This is a tough business to run for president.
I know you're a tough guy, Jeb.
And we need to have a leader that is
real tough.
You're never going to be president of the United States by insulting your way to the presidency.
Let's see. I'm at 42 and you're at 3. So far I'm doing better.
Doesn't matter.
So far I'm doing better.
He's a chaos candidate. And he'd be a chaos president.
It's time that we punch the Russians in the nose. They've gotten away with too much in this world.
3 times he voted against the Defense Authorization Act, and I have to assume that if you vote against it in the Senate, you would also veto it as president.
ISIS and radical Islamic terrorism will face no more determined foe than I will be.
I sure as hell don't want to let people that want to kill us and kill our nation use our internet.
Is Donald Trump a serious candidate? The reason I ask this is if you're going to close the internet, realize, America, what that entails.
Margaret Thatcher once said, if you want something talked about, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman.
It's the first time I've spoken, and several people have had multiple questions, so please try to pay attention to that.
If your eyes are glazed over like mine, this is what it's like to be on the floor of the United States Senate.
All right, we're back, and that audio was grabbed off of YouTube, and whoever put that together, nice job. I heard a couple things in there. One was about the shutting down the internet, and the other was about Ben Carson. When he, at the end there, when he said he wasn't getting any time, one of the moderators said, "Okay, Ben, or what do you think about?" And he asked him what they were talking about right then. The third opinion. He was, two of them were talking about it. They asked Ben. He said, "Oh, well, I don't really want to get in the middle of that. I'll let them talk about it." You know, and that's like the worst thing you can do.
Well, I think in that instance, that was like a pity. They threw him like a pity comment, and it wasn't what he wanted to be talking about, because it was, I forget it. I think it was Rubio and Rand Paul bickering or something like that. So I don't blame him for that. But at the same time, the way that some of these people, particularly Fiorina, complain about how they don't get enough talk time, it gets a little annoying. I think that they are trying to do what Trump and Cruz have done to the moderators by, throwing some heat back their way, but it just comes off as self-righteous, annoying. I get where they're coming from, but it's a little annoying.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what's really annoying is Kasich with his hand motions. I found a video I just came across this morning called Kasich, Karate Kasich, and it said it just had him with his hand motions like karate chops, and then it sped it up real fast, and it looked like he was. And then they put Bruce Lee on there. It was hilarious.
Wow, he really is a joke. He is one of the most antagonistic, unbalanced people on that stage. But then at the same time, he gets like his first question of the debate, and he starts talking about how his daughter complains that there's too much arguing in politics. And then he kind of segues into, how all politicians need to get along. No, they don't all need to get along. Absolutely. Absolutely not. It's not what we want. And also, what a dumb way to lead into a political argument that is going to go on for the next 2 hours to help us determine who is going to be the next president of the United States. And the first thing he's talking about is that there's too much arguing. He is so all over the place. He's a joke. And the worst thing he said, probably in all the debates, is that we need to punch Russia in the nose. That is so antagonistic and so stupid.
That was pathetic. I heard a lot of people talking about that. The deal with two things about shutting down the internet. Number one, well, we'll go with this first. The part of shutting down the internet, I think, is what they're referring to is what they're trying to pass with banning encryption. Now, that is a violation of First and Fourth Amendment. The only way journalists can communicate securely is with PGP keys and 256-bit encryption, and it's standard for that type of communication. It's lots of people use it, and if it's a real problem for them, they need to get some hackers, pull them out of the private sector that can crack that stuff, because it can be cracked. And that's one thing. And the other thing is Trump wasn't saying, I don't think he meant shut down the internet. I think that was him being not tech savvy or not knowing how to verbalize exactly what he meant. So there's that. And then Rand Paul, I think he went a little overboard with saying that you have to repeal the First Amendment to accomplish what Trump was wanting to do with ISIS, to cut off their communication. What do you think about those?
There's so many ways to carve this one up and destroy it. It just shows the childishness of the way that the media takes things out of context, and they refuse to do their due diligence and examine critically what is being said and the possibilities and what it means. So first of all, Rand Paul, no, ISIS terrorists in other countries, they don't get the First Amendment, so that doesn't apply to them. I understand sort of where he's coming from, but his desire to cut Trump down takes him out of the game. He's a good candidate. He's a solid constitutionalist. We know he's a good guy, but he's been so consumed with cutting Trump down that it really just makes him look foolish sometimes. But so there are so many different ways, like I said, to destroy the absurdity of everyone dismissing what Trump is saying. He's not a tech whiz. He's 70-something years old. He deals with other things. He's making a generalized statement that makes absolute sense if you put the right people in charge of it. So one reason why this doesn't make any sense is, first of all, because actually the Obama administration is actively not monitoring the social media activity of refugees. This is from ABC, okay? Fearing a civil liberties backlash and a bad public relations for the Obama administration, Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson refused in early 2014 to end a secret U.S. policy that prohibited immigration officials from reviewing the social media messages of all foreign citizens applying for U.S. visas. So, I mean, there's so many of these stories floating around now. They knew ahead of time everything that was going on with these two San Bernardino terrorists, and they did nothing about it. There's a moratorium on discussing jihad and Islam in the administration. They're taking it out of all the training books and the texts and the training in general. And I've heard that corroborated multiple times, many times by insiders, NSA guys, law enforcement. But then on the flip side of that, we can go to the actual technical aspect of how that's possible. And I mean, these guys can make, the people that know technology can make movies like Avatar, just mind-boggling feats of technology. They can do whatever they want. You post the wrong thing about guns or Islam on Facebook, you're banned, you're in the penalty box. They can find you, no problem, and they are. So Milo Yiannopoulos, who is over at Breitbart, he's their tech guy, real smart guy. He digs deep into this stuff. He put out a piece immediately after the debate explaining here's why Trump is right about shutting down parts of the internet. And he goes into a bit of a technical explanation that wouldn't even be worth reading online, but on the air. But he does, this is two quick sentences that give you an idea. He says, any traffic intended for the Islamic State on about 95% of the internet could be redirected to the United States and then null routed, essentially dumping everything into a black hole, perhaps after being analyzed by the NSA or the military. Problem solved. Second paragraph. Would this completely remove ISIS from the internet? For the most part, yes. All but the most tech-savvy jihadis would be gone, and while there would be plenty of ways to get around this fix, they would be time-consuming, expensive, technical, and easy to locate. So, you know, in a nutshell, in two little quick sentences there, he explains how it can be done. We know these guys can do whatever they want with the internet. We know who are using these accounts. We have rogue hacker groups like Anonymous shutting down, 20,000 plus ISIS Twitter accounts on their own. You're telling me that the NSA or DHS or any of these other alphabet agencies can't do even better? They can't shut down these highways of communication between jihadists in the United States and the West and into Syria and Iraq?
Yeah. They need to be recruiting from the skilled people in this country that they may not even have a job, but they may be, they may be able to crack anything, get into anything, carry out a massive DDoS attack. Have you ever looked at that site? If you ever get a chance, Norse, was it Norse.com? They study cyber war, and they have real-time maps that you can customize of where the cyber attacks are. They're going on nonstop, 24 hours a day. And some days, a couple of U.S. cities will just be lit up with, you can see where it's coming from. It's really interesting. But the dark web, the deep, the part of the internet that's actually the largest part of the internet that nobody goes to, and most people don't even know how to access it. It's a whole, there's a whole another world in there, and I know that the FBI lives in there, but they might be watching it, but we need the top talent from hacker groups and use their talent for something good, compensate them, give them a lot of money to, as it is, Anonymous carries out some attacks on really bad groups or bad people. So I'm not saying they don't already do that, but if they were in a more structured environment, they could help a lot,
Sure, and I mean, if the media, the mainstream media or whatever, can access, they have information on where pro-ISIS Twitter, tweets are originating by country, and they can pinpoint that. So the United States, as of the last count, is the 4th highest originator for pro-ISIS tweets. If they can figure that out, why can't they figure out exactly which accounts are doing it and trace it back to the IP address, find out where the IP address is, and go have a talk with these guys? It's not that hard. And clearly there is a lot of inside stuff going on that we're being lied to left and right.
There's either
go ahead.
There's no will to do it, or they definitely don't want to do it for a reason.
Exactly. So along those lines, I think another thing that came out of this debate, and particularly the one before it at the kids' table, some of those guys really should be kicked up to the big leagues, because John Kasich has no business being there. Jeb has no business being there. I would love to see Mike Huckabee and Rick Santorum get in the mix up there, because they are some of the best candidates on the bill. But something that Santorum said and Cruz kind of echoed is something that needs to be talked about more, because Americans, non-Islamic, infidel Americans, do not understand the true scope of Islam. They don't understand that it is not just a religion. It is a theocratic political ideology. And the religious component is only part of it. There's a whole other thing going on. They have Sharia law. It's their own constitution. And I think you mentioned it in the last episode, but even polls taken directly out of the United States of Muslims, 51% of them want to live under Sharia law. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot. And so this quote by Rick Santorum is spot on, and he's one of the few who has addressed this. He said, "The fact of the matter is Islam is different. I know this is going to come as a shock to a lot of people, and I mean that sincerely. Islam is not just a religion, it's also a political governing structure. The fact of the matter is Islam is a religion, but it's also Sharia law. It is also a civil government. It is also a form of government." And later on, Cruz said very similar things in the second debate, differentiating that Islam is not only a religion, but it's also a political and theocratic ideology. And that needs to be put in the forefront. Everyone needs to understand that. These people are not playing by the same rules and laws as the rest of us. And not only that, but they don't want our laws. They want to bring in their laws. And those laws have no place in the West, especially not in the United States. And that's why it's dangerous to bring them here, to colonize our own country.
The West is in deep trouble, and there's no point in settling them all in a culture. I know that we get immigrants, but a mass amount of refugees.
Well, so along those lines about the Syrian refugees, this is something that Pamela Geller brought up on Lou Dobbs. Pamela, for anyone who doesn't know, is a real hero. She lives with a constant death threat on her head. She gets virtually no assistance from the government in terms of protection. She's funding her own private security at this point. But she was on Lou Dobbs, I think it was yesterday, and she revealed, and she really would know, she's on top of this stuff, she lives it all day, that Obama has already imported 100,000 Syrian immigrants into the United States since 2012. So this little number they're kicking around about 10,000 coming up, or then they've bumped it up to 200,000. Nobody's talking about that, but they're still fixated on this 10,000 number. He's averaging, or let's say Obama or the administration, they're averaging between 30 and 40,000 a year already. This is the situation we're in. They're quietly doing this. They're publicly announcing some things to get people riled up, that they're privately backdooring the rest of it. It is just a wave of millions and millions of people coming into this country that have no business being here.
It's a Trojan horse.
No doubt.
Yeah, and what the states have no power. My governor said we're not taking any. Governor Abbott in Texas said he's not taking any, but just last week he got a group of them. And meanwhile, they've deported a few families of Christian refugees from either Syria or Iraq. It doesn't really matter. The point is, he's giving them a religious test before he brings them here. But for us to say we're a little uncomfortable with people that don't have a name or don't get vetted just getting plopped in our cities, when we see pictures of them and they're all fighting age men, they leave the women and children behind. And then he says, you're afraid of a bunch of women and children. And then 2 weeks later, a woman kills 14 people, and her husband kill 14 people. So that's the kind of logic he uses, and that's just, I don't know. Sometimes I just can't figure out the balance between evil and stupidity with him. And there's some intelligence, but it's not common sense intelligence, right?
Well, no, it's just enough brain power to stay locked into the doxies. But and back to what you said about the women and children, if you pay a little attention to what's going on over in the Middle East and with ISIS and whatnot, they have, and Hamas, all these terrorist groups, they are training children from the ripe old age of 2 to behead, to kill, to hate the Jew, to kill the Christian. There's countless videos coming out of children learning how to kill. They have training camps full of young kids under the age of 10 that are learning how to shoot AK-47s and cut the heads off dolls and prepare for their future, fight. And here in the West, in the United States, kids are learning about,
climate
the most
change,
bizarre, politically correct garbage, climate change, exactly. And Tommy has 2 mommies or whatever that book is. And it's just, our kids are being prepared to be wet blobs of nothing, and those kids over there are preparing to fight. And eventually that's going to come to a head, whether people want to admit that or not.
And it's not just, Europe's already done for. Europe's done for a lot of the cities. I mean, a lot of the countries in Europe. And like we're going to follow them, whether it's 5, 10, 15 years behind. They regret what they let happen, and now there's no turning back. Now these kids are all going to be warriors in 10 years, 15 years, and they've been training these kids for years. But now they've got their own caliphate. They're establishing a caliphate. So there's a huge. I'm sure that their recruitment is through the roof.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time traveling around Europe, a lot of countries, a lot of cities. I went there for almost a month and traveled for about 10 different countries over the course of, like I said, about a month in 2012. And I was unaware of what the situation is there. I ended up in entire sectors of large cities like Paris, Hamburg, Germany, in Amsterdam, where it was basically a no-go zone. We were the only Caucasians for blocks. It was very hostile, very dirty. And, that was 2012. Now they're just taking the KO punch with these waves and waves of refugees coming in. But with the jihad via the womb, which they are notorious for, just reproduction, they are totally subsuming and overwhelming the European cities, the towns, the countries, the culture, and they know that they have the upper hand, and they're going into the next phase of jihad with now that they have the numbers.
Yeah, they are. And Europe, Great Britain, they look they sent some messages to Ted Nugent last week or something, and they said, Ted, the United States is the only hope for freedom on the globe. He said, we're done for here. You people need to fight this. You need to get your country back and destroy Islamofascism. And that's it's really sad because we're not doing that right now. We don't have any leadership, and we're in denial. And who knows what else inside baseball is going on within the government that we have no clue.
Yeah, I think that a lot of Americans take it for granted. They have no idea because they have a very narrow worldview. But the rest of the free world, the good people out there, the good patriots that live in Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain, you name it, they are all looking to the United States as the final hope, the bastion of freedom, liberty. And they say, I think Trevor Loudon from New Zealand, if anyone can go look up his Enemies Within presentation on YouTube, you really need to go watch it. But he says it very plainly. He says if the United States goes down, it's over. It's over for everyone because we are the bastion of freedom and liberty in the world.
By the way, Trevor's show is on the Rebooting Liberty radio network. So if you go to live.rebootingliberty.com, you can also listen to Trevor Loudon's radio show. It's on TK Radio Network, and we may have him on next month. That would be really cool.
That would be awesome. His message is so great. His website is keywiki.com. I recommend anyone go check that out. You can put in people's names and find out. For instance, you could put in John Podesta, Maxine Waters, Barack Obama, whatever you want, and find out all their connections to subversive, socialist, communist, Marxist groups and their histories. So I recommend that everyone go check that out and go do some research on your favorite socialist.
Definitely. And his movie, he's in the process of filming. He's discussing that on his radio show as well. That's called Enemies Within. And he's asking for people to help out. So he has not a GoFundMe, Indiegogo for the movie. So if you go to newzealblog.com, and that's his blog, and there's links to the movie, and there's some clips of the movie. I'm looking forward to it. But
it's powerful. Everyone should listen to his message because it's clear, it's deep, it's well researched, and he'll get you fired up and get you caring about your country again if you're not.
Yeah. Well, we've come to the end of the hour, Dan. Where can people find you at?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Citizen Analyst. You can find me on Facebook at Citizen Analyst. And you can find me at the Western Free Press, westernfreepress.com. And my latest article just went up live. It's featured. It's called Has the Left Overplayed Its Hand? I recommend you go there and check that out. Have a great week.
Cool. You can find me at rebootingliberty.com, Twitter at JaredDayAZ. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you'll join us next time. Remember, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Stay vigilant, seek the truth, and don't be silent. God bless America.
You're tuned in to Rebooting Liberty.
Hey, liberals, why don't you try rooting for your own damn country for a change?